Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Zimbabwe's land reform, or rather, Zanu PF land reform, because the ordinary people of Zimbabwe had no meaningful say in that program, has been a complete disaster for the country. And it is nonsensical, to say the least, to say otherwise. This video by this lady, supposedly from Namibia, is a total misrepresentation of the political reality in Zimbabwe. Let's just listen to a short clip of it, then we'll discuss it.
Today, I will debunk one of the most vicious lies ever told by Western powers and Western media about Africa. A lie that is so powerful that it prevents the people of Africa from reclaiming their land from the former colonizers. In my last episode, I spoke about my painful experience and the brutal reality that I encountered in Namibia, where still up to this day, over 70% of the land is owned by the descendants of German colonizers and other foreigners. And the responses that I got in the comment section left me in disbelief and showed me that this vicious lie seems to be working perfectly, and it's time to debunk it. I'm talking about people trying to justify the inequality in Namibia by pointing their finger towards Zimbabwe and trying to convince us that if we dare to reclaim our land, we will end up like Zimbabwe, in shambles. But the saddest part is that there were so many Black Africans in the comment section who expressed their fear that if they dare to reclaim their land, they will end up like Zimbabwe. And that is why I decided right now it's the time that I share my eye-opening experience in Zimbabwe with you.
Sorry about that. You listen to the intro there. What do you think of it, Ben?
I didn't feel better when I drank apple cider vinegar every day for years.
Good day to you and good day to everybody. Thank you for joining us. You know, unfortunately, the lady in question is telling half the truth. Because, I believe land, for example, Zimbabwe, the land issue, the land belongs to Zimbabweans. And every Zimbabwean, whether black, white, yellow, green, or, has, the same equal say in land and should have the same opportunity and have access to land. That much I agree with her. But then to say it was a political weapon that was used by Western media, nobody has ever stopped, Africa, Africans from owning their land. That is a lie.
Well, I think if one needs to correct one thing here from the word go, the issue of the land that the whites colonialists had seized the land from the blacks is a historic fact. I don't want to be commenting on Namibia. I don't know the details. But I think this lady should also respect the people of Zimbabwe. And if she's going to talk about Zimbabwe, which she went on to do in a video, she should report on the facts and not the propaganda. The fact of the matter is, Zanu PF did seize the white-owned farms beginning 2000. But the land was not given to the landless peasants, as was originally stated. We all know that the land, most of the land, that the farms that were seized, were given to Zanu PF ruling elite and their cronies. The landless peasants did not get any land. I think that is point number one. Why is she wanting to say now that Zimbabwe's land problem was solved? It wasn't solved. I don't know whether you've got another point you wanted to mention there, then.
Yes, my question to her would have been, did she manage to pay a visit to the communal lands, to the rural areas in Zimbabwe? And did she see that, the rural community, do they have title deeds to the area that they have built their homesteads? And the answer would have been no. Zimbabweans do not have title deeds to the land. So where is she getting the narrative to say Zimbabweans now own the land? Zimbabweans don't own land. Zanu PF owns the land. That's the truth of the whole matter. It's unfortunate, like you said, she has got her own narrative or agenda behind the movement instead of speaking out the truth and the whole truth.
Well, in this particular case, most of the white-owned farms, like I said, were allocated to the Zanu PF and the Zanu PF ruling elite. And here is a picture of Mnangagwa standing on one of his farms. As you can see, it stretches to the horizon. How many landless peasants were resettled in some of these seized farms? A tiny minority. And like you correctly said, they were never given title deeds, those few who were resettled. But to come back to the majority of Black Zimbabweans, they still live in the rural areas in abject poverty. This is a typical homestead in the rural area of Zimbabwe today. A grass-thatched hut. That is the reality. They are not allowed to own even a few square meters of the land on which their hut is built. The whites denied blacks title deeds for the simple reason that the whites fear that if the blacks were to own the land, the next thing they will be asking for is political rights. And after independence, a white economist and banker, John Robertson, who had advised Ian Smith's regime to give people in the rural areas title deeds, advised Mugabe the same thing. And he refused to give people title deeds for the same reason that the white regime refused them the title deeds. This is why the rural areas are called tribal trust lands. No one owns the land, it's held in trust. And the government can move in and say, where you are, you should not be staying there. one of the reasons why Zanu PF has retained this is because they've used their proxies, the headmen, the chiefs, the war veterans, to harass ordinary Zimbabweans for selfish political gain. That has been at the heart of the land redistribution in Zimbabwe. It did not address the fundamental issue of giving the landless peasants in the rural areas, most of them densely populated, and the land is very poor, and therefore then they can only scratch a living. That was not addressed. And the other point that must be pointed out here is this issue which she went on to address. It's no point, it's a long video, so I'll not play the whole thing. But she went on to talk about how it is a lie that the Zimbabwe economy failed. The truth of the matter is the seizure of the white-owned farms, giving them to people who were not able to make good use of the land, did lead to the collapse of the agricultural sector, and with it, the economy. And between the year 2000 to 2008, Zimbabwe's economy shrunk by a staggering 50% for two reasons: the collapse of the agricultural sector, plus the madness of printing money, captained by the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, Gideon Gono, at the time, which fueled inflation to 500 billion%. That is what caused the economic collapse of Zimbabwe. And to keep on pretending that it didn't happen, I find it ridiculous.
The other thing that is of note is that, unfortunately, we couldn't play the whole video, but I'm sure our listeners, if they go on YouTube and look for the title, which is there at the bottom, they will find out, that this lady, whatever she said, she crushed herself at every end of the sentence. Every time when she says, blame somebody else, she would come back and blame it on the Zimbabwe government and the failures. It's funny how people always want to point a finger and accuse others, and yet, they are their own worst enemy. Zimbabwe is their worst, is its own worst enemy. The government of Zimbabwe, instead of, giving the people land ownership, they used it as a weapon. And this weapon was used in a way that, without ownership of land, without true ownership of land, you become enslaved to the master. So now, because the government of Zimbabwe owns the land rightfully, and you're just a tenant there, whatever I say goes. This is why you find, in this modern day, you still have thatched huts. There is no meaningful development that can come onto that land or onto that piece of land when you do not have ownership of it, 100% ownership of it. I'll give you an example. When the land reform program was unfolding, it was Mugabe who actually said, do not build permanent structures, because this thing is not permanent. And for sure, it was the 99-year lease. After that lease, nobody knows what is going to happen thereafter. So you cannot go there now and invest a lot of money in something that has no, future guarantee to say where do I stand after this. That point must be said that you cannot say somebody owns something and not own it completely.
Well, I would like to bring back the main point here that the land issue was meant or should have been to address the land hunger of the peasants, the landless peasants who live in the densely populated rural areas. Here is Margaret Dongo, a former Zanu PF MP herself, speaking on the issue of why Zanu PF is deliberately keeping the people of Zimbabwe, particularly in the rural areas, poor for their own political gain.
They have wrong priorities, especially the current government. How can you go and build an airport which services a few people, and the majority are the elite and the so-called investors? Look at the rural. I made you come to interview me because I wanted you to have the experience of the roads that we are using. If we go today to our hospital there, you feel pity with that's a hospital in a rural area. If we go to our clinic, you feel pity. We have no piped water here. Do you know the reason why the rural people vote for Zanu PF? One, they're intimidated. Two, the policy is that the rural people should remain poor and subservient to the government. They should remain poor because if they remain poor, they continue singing the song for their master. This is why these people have been impoverished. It's for a reason. Because at the moment, if you economic empower these people, they'll go out of hand. Zanu PF will never have control over them.
So my closing remark is countries like Namibia, South Africa, and many other African countries, they should address the issue of the land ownership as they see fit. But to try to give Zimbabwe as an example of where it worked is the most idiotic and nonsensical statement anyone can ever make. Zimbabwe has to revisit this land issue. Right now, a few weeks ago, Mnangagwa announced that he will be giving title deeds to those who were allocated the farms. This is just an extension of the Zanu PF rigging and looting. The ordinary people in the rural area, like I said, are still being denied title deeds to even a few square meters of land on which their mud hut is built. And the ruling elite who got most of these farms, some of them multiple farms, are now going to get title deeds. They didn't pay a single dollar for those farms. Now they are going to get title deeds and they'll be legally entitled to sell them as they see fit. And they will subdivide these farms and sell them to the rest of the populace at exorbitant prices when they paid nothing for them in the first place. This is just another Zanu PF rigging and looting. And to keep on posturing, claiming that Zimbabwe has been misrepresented and Zanu PF's land reform is an example for the rest of the world to follow. is the most pathetic thing anyone can do. If you're going to talk about Zimbabwe, please confine yourself to the facts and not what Zanu PF propaganda tells you. Thank you very much. Ben, do you want to give your closing remarks?
Thank you. In closing, I would want to say, if you're going to say something and you don't have the true facts, it is better to shut up than to spread falsehoods. Who did she ask? Who did she see? Did she go and talk to people? Because this is not what Zimbabweans are living. Zimbabweans still do not have ownership and 100% ownership of the land. Zanu PF holds everything. So, you cannot then go and say, the Westerns, they said this and this and that. When Zanu PF has now turned against his people to use this same land as a weapon to keep themselves in power and to keep people in check. Please do not make false reports and videos. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. And thank you very much for those who were able to join us to listen in. I hope you'll be able to do so again tomorrow, 6 o'clock UK time, 8 o'clock Zimbabwean time. Good night.